So I was sent a screener for a movie called Dorothea, and this one caught my attention because it is based on the real life murders of Dorothea Puente. And this is a person I became familiar with the Netflix original series Worst Roommate Ever. And we watched that episode, and I think that might have been the first episode of the whole show. And I just expected the show to be like, some shitty roommate who, they came over to the house and it was like a train wreck and they were psycho and whatever. I had no idea it was going to start with a serial killer that went this hard. The story was fascinating. This woman had been taking in these elderly people and people who were homeless, and she was uh, cashing their social security checks or cashing their checks they were getting from the government, and using them for herself, of course. And then she was killing them and burying them in her backyard in a rose garden. And she was cashing their checks and living off of that. And one of the craziest things was that she was posing as an elderly woman, acting more frail, dressing in clothes that made her look older and whatever. And then they found out like she was much younger than she appeared to be. This was like a tactic to appear weaker and less threatening so that people would trust her. And when they were investigating her murders in the house, she like slipped out the back door, and it took them a little while to track her down. And it was just such an insane story. It was wild, and I was like, holy shit, this story, it definitely deserves to be a film one day. And here we are. So yeah, the director or writer of this decided to take this in a way that I just did not care for. Like, this is not the way to handle this material, in my opinion, and that hurt the film. Like, as a film, it's fine. It's totally watchable. I think that the performance from our lead here is quite good. There's a lot of style. There's a lot of style to the film, so I do think the director has talent. And I think that they are capable of making a film that I would enjoy. And maybe if this wasn't attached to Dorothea Puente, uh, I would have maybe liked this more. I still would have probably had some similar issues, but not all of the same ones, of course. I think that her story can be told in a way that honors the victims, right? That's probably one of the things that I would have liked most from this movie, because the people she was taking advantage of were so helpless. I mean, she might as well have been picking on children. You're talking about very elderly people who could not take care of themselves, basically. They were in their 70s and whatnot, a lot of them. And she was drugging them, and it was terrible, terrible. Or, in that documentary we watched, they really focused on this homeless man who she took in. And that was they were all devastating, but because we personally got to know him better and we saw videos of him and how shy he was, some bit on the spectrum, I'm assuming. And he just thought that finally the world had done right by him. After all the horrible things that happened to him, he had to live on the streets, being how he was, no fault of his own. And this world is finally catching him a break, and he gets moved in with a serial killer. And luckily, that is the person who is responsible, because of a social worker tracking him down. I know this sounds like spoilers, but this is like a pretty well documented case, and you should definitely go check out documentaries on this because it's fascinating for sure. Um, I was just really surprised by how they handled this material. This is played out like a totally like stylistic dark comedy, and I'm not opposed to taking serious material like this and satirizing it to a degree. I did enjoy the Ed Gein show that Ryan Murphy just did on Netflix. I know there's a lot of controversy around that one and how that was handled and whatnot, and I totally understand that. I'm not somebody who doesn't get why it upsets people. I totally do. I mean, these are people who died, and their murder shouldn't be played for entertainment, right? This one just felt like it didn't handle the material in a way that made it interesting to me. Like the actual case itself was much more interesting and could have been handled in a very serious way and exposed this woman for the very mentally unwell, pathological sociopath that she was. And while some of that, is attempted here, we definitely get a crazy person. It's just a very silly movie. It's like a goof. It's as I said, it's a dark comedy, and I just don't like this approach for this. I just don't. It's a lower budgeted film. It feels fairly cheap at times, and that's not the film's fault. I don't care about that kind of stuff. Working within your limitations is fine by me. I'll look past a lot of different things. But I feel like when you're handling material like this, you've really got to take a beat and think about what's the best way to handle a story like this of one of the most interesting serial killer cases there is, because as we all know, there's not a lot of female serial killers. This story is wild, and you could actually, I hope somebody else covers this movie. I hope this is done again in a serious way, and to really make us feel for what these people went through, right? And to do it more genuine. Like there's a lot of silliness and fabrication, which there's plenty of fabrication in the Ryan Murphy show as well. I get that. But there's additional things that are just there for, theatricality. There's like an added death of a character that I know didn't die, and the way that it happens alongside of another character that didn't die. That's just supposed to be there to make her look more cunning and badass, and it's just I don't know. It doesn't work in that regard, and then it makes the characters look really stupid. It does not portray the character I had, or the person character. I shouldn't call it a character, but I'm talking about in the movie character. It does not portray the real person who I had referenced earlier, the mentally, unwell, or not unwell. The homeless guy that I just talked about. The way he's portrayed in this is nothing like the guy that you see videos of in The Worst Roommate Ever. Like, if I'm going to recommend something, watch that episode. I'm sure there's other things on her as well that might be just as good or better than that, but go to Worst Roommate Ever. It's like, I don't know what the episode's called. I'm sure it's pretty easy to find. Granny Killer or something. I don't know. But that was like bone chilling. That shit stuck with me. I've watched a lot of those style of like documentaries on killers throughout the years, and for sure I've definitely retained a lot of it. But this one really struck a nerve with me. There was something about how it all went down, how unbelievable the story felt. It felt theatrical. It felt like a movie, right? And that's why I feel like this story's so right for an adaptation, but not this one. Not this one. I think this was a huge misstep covering Dorothea Puente. So, not a recommendation from me. I mean, if you are fascinated by this story, it is available right now, I guess, because it's tomorrow. It's the 4th. Or maybe today's the 3rd now because it's past midnight. So the 4th, November 4th is when this comes out. Yeah, that's tomorrow. It should be available for rent. It was limitedly released in theaters. Um, yeah, it sucks because I do think that the woman they cast actually kind of looks like her in her pictures. Um, and I would have liked to have seen this woman who I think gives a pretty damn good performance. Um, I would have liked them to just do it more serious. You could throw some dark humor into it, but while there is some dark comedy in the Ed Gein series, I'm only comparing it to that because that's the most recent serial killer thing that I watched that also doesn't do everything authentically, takes liberties, pissed people off. Um, the way that the deaths are portrayed, the way that things are handled there are grim, right? They're gruesome. They're not playful. They're not funny. They're not played for goofs or laughs or like giving a zany performance around it. Those are handled in a way that feels wrong. And the characters are empathetic. Like you're empathetic towards them. They're sympathetic. Um, and I didn't get that with this one. The characters were all kind of goofs. So yeah, I just really don't like how this material is handled. Knowing the case, having watched that and really being fascinated by this story, I was really hoping for a much more sinister look at this person, but they kind of played her like she was this kind of, I don't know, badass, feminine, not anti-hero. I guess they don't really ever paint her in a heroic light. They do try to give her a sympathetic background to start, and that's fine. I mean, I'm fine with, finding out what makes people tick, having seen the full well-rounded picture of them. I don't know. This one just made me feel wrong while watching it. I just didn't care for it anyway. I'm not going to keep beating a dead horse here, but God, yeah, there's this scene, and I know that part of this happened, like some of it definitely happened in real life, but there's just the stupidity, the sheer ignorance that you have to look past of this character who like builds a coffin for her and their whole exploits from there, and her, it's so obvious that she's killing people. It's so obvious what's going on, and the character is just played as such a dumbass. And it's, I don't know, man. It's just it's frustrating, and then the way that people are killed off in this movie, it's just not. And then there's weird things where I was looking it up as I was watching it, where it was talking about characters, and it would say their names, and they would say their names and who they were, and it matched up perfectly with their names, but their ages were all weird and wrong. Some of them were right too. Some of them were like, I'm 64 or whatever, and it would be 64, and then other ones would be like, I'm 71, and they were like 75 when they died. It's weird. That's like, I don't know. It's like they did the basic amount of uh, googling on this and just kind of wrote a script uh, based on recollection of something they heard a while ago. It is, yeah. Nope, not for me. That's it. I'm done. Adios.